this is Joanna and welcome back to another video for the Alleyway stamps. And today I'm using two stamp sets. I'm using Learning Curve and I'm also using Bubbly. And I will create my own background, so I'm using some post-it tape to mask off the back side of the card. And I will stamp this with Hero Art's Soft Granite. This is a really nice grey shade, I think. And I haven't used this stamp before, so I'm just testing it off to a piece of scrap paper to make sure that it stamps correctly. And then I'm just building up my background. And the reason that I'm stamping in grey instead of black is that I want the background to have a really soft look. And I'm using my viscose press. This is really good when you're trying to line up stamps as well. And here I'm starting, I'm not stamping the first book because I don't want the piles to look exactly the same. And then I just keep stamping and filling up my background. And here I'm just wiping away one of the books so I can have another, so the piles doesn't look the same. Another background is finished, so I remove the post-it tape and I will save this for another project. You can use them many times before the glue is too old. And I want to stamp the little apple on top of one of the books. And I will color them with Copics later, so I'm stamping it with Memento ink. And I'm just testing it off to the side first. And it's stamped very nice, so then I just stamp it onto my card. And now it's time to create the chalkboard. And I have a piece of black cardstock and also a piece of red cardstock that will turn out to be the frame later. I will show you that later. So I'm using my anti-static tool because I'm going to do some heat embossing and I don't want white embossing strays everywhere. And I'm stamping the thanks with my Versamark. So I try to line it up there. And I'm also stamping teacher just below it, also with my Versamark. And then I take my white embossing powder and I sprinkle it on. And I use a piece of scrap paper to pour it onto so I can funnel it back into the jar. And I really love this anti-static tool, especially when you are embossing white on black. Here I'm just embossing my sentiment using my heat gun. And I'm also warming it on the back side, and I'm also working the paper just a little bit to prevent warping. And of course it's a little bit too big, so I just brought it over to my paper trimmer to trim it down to size. And now it's time to work on the frame, and I'm using my paper trimmer again to cut it down to size, so it's just a little bit bigger than the black piece. And I'm not measuring this, I'm just eyeballing it as usual. I'm not a big fan of measuring, I have to say. So here I'm quite happy with how it turned out. So and just to make sure that it looks like a frame, I'm cutting it on each side. And I do that because I'm going to ink this up and I want it to look like there are a wooden frame and they are joined together in the ends. So that's why I'm doing that. I will show you later what I mean. I have my sponge dauber box here, so I'm just bringing out my sponge dauber for brown, and I'm also bringing out my brown distress ink. And I'm going to emphasize those cuts with the distress ink and also the edges. And I'm working on a craft sheet, and if you don't have a craft sheet you can just use any slick surface. In the past I always used a protector sheet, and I just slipped in a white piece of paper inside of it, and it works just as fine. I thought I would buy a craft sheet because maybe then I could have less glare, but I'm not sure if I did. Maybe I have to check my light settings, but well, I'm sorry about the glare, by the way. But here I'm just adding my brown distress ink into those cuts that I did earlier. And I'm also adding more distress ink on the edges until I'm happy with the result. And I just use a baby wipe to wipe off the surface. And now it's time to make the black look like a chalkboard. So I'm taking a sponge dabber again, and I'm just lightly adding some white onto the edges and also onto the entire piece. And this is pigment ink, and it takes quite a while to dry, so you have to leave it alone a little bit so you don't smear the paint. So I left it maybe for 5 or 10 minutes. And here I'm adhering those pieces together, and I'm using my ATG to do that. So I'm just pressing it in place. And I'm testing it out on my card. And I'm using 2 shades of red to color in my apple. So I was trying to coordinate with the frame. And the paper, the cardstock that I'm using are Copic friendly cardstock. So this is quite heavy, so it won't bleed through. But if you don't have that kind of cardstock, you can just stamp it onto another piece of cardstock and fussy cut it out and adhere it to the card, and you will and it will look just as good, I think. And I want a piece of apple on the inside as well, so I'm just bringing out my memento again, and I'm stamping the apple on the inside, and I will color it just the same as I did on the outside. And if you are interested in any of the products that I use in this video, they are listed over at my blog, and you can find that address in the YouTube description down below. And just to make sure that the ink is really dry, I used my heat tool there, as you saw, to prevent that the ink smeared. And I'm just coloring the apple on the inside exactly as I did on the outside. And as you can see, there are no, it's not leaking through the paper. And then I used my big roll of foam tape to adhere the chalkboard onto my card. And I actually made 10 of these cards because I'm going to give them to my 2 kids' teachers. So they were really easy to make and fun to make as well. So I hope that you get inspired, and thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye.